I am Marla Kincaid, and engines are my language. Not the kind you'd expect from a woman, my stepfamily loves to remind me, but I've spent a decade tearing apart and rebuilding automotive systems until they hum like a perfect symphony. My hands are calloused, my mind's a blueprint of torque and timing, and my heart? It's wired to the roar of a V8. I redesigned to cut emissions by 30%. I'm a senior engineer at Halverson Motors, a company clawing its way to the top of the green tech game. But to my stepfamily, the illustrious Bannisters of Bannister Enterprises, none of that matters. To them I'm just the mechanic, the grease-stained stepsister who never quite fit their polished world of boardrooms and champagne. It started when I was 12, after Mom remarried Vance Bannister, a man whose wallet was as big as his ego. His kids, my step-siblings Elton and Twyla, were already groomed for corporate thrones, while I was the oddball sneaking into the garage to tinker with Dad's old Chevy. By 16, I'd rebuilt its engine. By 25, I'd patented a fuel injector that saved Halverson millions. But at every family gathering, my work was a punchline. "Marla's still playing with her tools," Twyla would smirk, while Elton droned about his latest merger. Vance would nod, proud of his real heirs as I sat there invisible, my contributions dismissed like a smudge they could wipe away. I never imagined my phone would buzz at the perfect moment, shattering their smug little world. But before I tell you how that call changed everything, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe. You'll want to see how this ends. See, I've always known my worth, even when they didn't. Growing up, I'd overhear Vance's friends, men in suits who owned half the city, call me the help. Because I'd rather fix a carburetor than sip their overpriced wine. Mom, bless her, tried to bridge the gap, but she passed 5 years ago, leaving me alone in their orbit. My stepfamily's empire, Bannister Enterprises, is a juggernaut, real estate, tech, now eyeing a $600 million merger with the German auto giant Krieger GmbH. They think it's their ticket to global dominance. They don't know it's a house of cards. I don't fit their mold, and I stopped trying to. My world is Halverson's R&D lab, where I lead a team of misfits like me, engineers who'd rather talk horsepower than hedge funds. We're family in a way the Bannisters never were. There's Dewey, my wiry lab partner with a knack for sensors, and Selma, our coder who can make an ECU sing. They know my story, how I clawed my way up from intern to senior engineer while the Bannisters laughed. They also know about my side project, like the one I've kept secret even from them. It's a prototype that could redefine electric vehicles, something I built in my garage over 3 years of sleepless nights. It's my ace, my proof that I'm more than their mockery. But every year, I'm dragged back to the Bannister estate for their annual dinner, a ritual of peacocking and passive aggression. Tomorrow's the night, and I'm dreading it. Vance will be there, grizzled and smug, with Elton, the golden son, and Twyla, whose smile hides a knife. There's also Perry, Twyla's husband, a weasel who fancies himself a dealmaker, and Fern, Elton's fiancée, who's all charm until you cross her. They'll grill me, not about my patents or my team, but about why I'm still wasting my life in a garage. They don't know Halverson's on the cusp of a deal that could make my prototype the industry's holy grail. They don't know I'm the one holding the cards. Not yet. The Bannisters' dining room always felt like a stage, and I was never the star. Growing up, I'd sit at that mahogany table, watching my stepfamily rewrite my existence. I was 18 when I overheard Vance tell a guest I was just a phase. Mom was enduring. That stung, but it was nothing compared to the time Twyla forgot to invite me to her college graduation party. I just won a regional engineering award for a hybrid engine tweak, my first real win. I showed up anyway, trophy in hand, thinking maybe they'd see me. Elton laughed, called it a cute hobby, and steered the conversation to his MBA acceptance at Wharton. Vance clapped his shoulder, proud, while I stood there, my achievement dissolving into their chatter. Flash to when I was 22, fresh out of MIT with a mechanical engineering degree. I'd busted my ass working nights at a garage to pay for textbooks while Twyla flitted through her art history major on Vance's dime. At Thanksgiving, I shared how I'd landed an internship at Halverson Motors, a scrappy startup with big dreams. Perry, Twyla's then boyfriend, snorted, "What, like changing oil?" The table erupted in laughter. Vance didn't correct him. He just poured more wine. Mom tried to pivot asking about my project, but Fern, newly engaged to Elton, cut in with wedding plans. My internship, my grind, it was all background noise to their spotlight. By 27, I was a full engineer at Halverson, leading a project that slashed fuel consumption in our mid-size SUV line. It saved the company from bankruptcy and got me a quiet nod from the CEO. I brought the press clipping to Christmas, naive enough to think they'd care. Twyla glanced at it, said, "That's nice, Marla," then launched into how she'd curated a gallery opening that redefined modern aesthetics. Vance beamed, called her a visionary. Elton, meanwhile, was closing a deal to buy a failing tech firm, which Vance toasted as true Bannister brilliance. My clipping sat untouched, like a coaster for their drinks. The worst was Mom's funeral, 3 years ago. I was 30, just promoted to senior engineer. I'd designed a braking system that cut stopping distances by 10%, a literal lifesaver. I wanted to tell Mom, to see her smile. Instead, I stood graveside as Vance eulogized her as the perfect wife, Twyla as the perfect daughter. No mention of me. After, at the house, I overheard Fern whisper to Perry that I was leeching off the family name by showing up. I'd driven 6 hours, my hands still raw from lab work, but to them, I was an intruder. Elton pulled me aside later, not to comfort, but to ask if I'd consider skipping future gatherings to keep things smooth. I left without a word. Every slight built a wall, but it also fueled me. While they celebrated their wins, Twyla's gallery flops, Elton's overhyped acquisitions, I was in Halverson's lab, grinding. Dewey would catch me at midnight, tweaking designs, and joke I was building a rocket to escape them. Selma, our coder, saw through my silence, once saying, "Marla, you're outshining them and they're too blind to see it." They weren't wrong. I'd learned to keep my victories close, like the prototype I was pouring my soul into. It was my rebellion, my proof. But tomorrow's dinner loomed, and I knew they'd try to erase me again. They didn't know I was carrying something bigger than their empire, something that could shift the world under their feet. The lab was my sanctuary, but my garage was my cathedral. 3 years ago, at 29, I had this spark, an idea that could make electric vehicles not just viable, but revolutionary. It wasn't enough to tweak existing systems. I wanted to rewrite the game. The aha moment hit me at 2 a.m., hunched over a laptop in my cramped apartment, coffee cold, equations sprawling across my screen. What if we could integrate a modular battery system that dynamically adjusted power output based on real-time driving conditions? It could triple range, cut charging times, and make EVs accessible to people who couldn't afford a 6-figure Tesla. I called it the kinetic core, and it became my obsession. The struggle was brutal. I was already pulling 60-hour weeks at Halverson, leading projects that paid my bills. My garage became a war zone of prototypes, circuit boards, lithium cells, and half-built frames. I burned through savings, maxed 2 credit cards, and skipped sleep so often Dewey started smuggling energy drinks into the lab. Selma offered to code the core's control software, but I refused. This was mine, my secret. I couldn't risk leaks, not when Krieger GmbH, the German auto giant, was sniffing around Halverson for a merger. If they got wind of this, they'd either steal it or bury it to protect their own tech. The first prototype failed spectacularly. 6 months in, I flipped the switch and it fried itself in a cloud of sparks. I sat on the garage floor staring at the smoking wreck, wondering if Twyla was right. Maybe I was just a tinkerer, out of my depth. But I rebuilt it, then again. By year 2 I had a working model. It was clunky, the size of a mini fridge, but it powered a salvaged hatchback for 400 miles on a single charge. I drove it at dawn, no one around, and when the odometer hit 400, I pulled over and cried. Not because it worked, but because I'd done it alone. Last year, I perfected it. The kinetic core was now sleek, scalable, and ready for production. I tested it in secret, retrofitting a Halverson prototype EV. It hit 600 miles, charged in under 20 minutes, and outperformed every competitor's spec sheet. I filed a patent under a shell company to keep it off Halverson's radar. Not even Dewey knew the full scope. I told myself it was about control, but deep down it was about the Bannisters. I wanted to walk into that dinner, their smug faces judging me, and know I held something they couldn't touch. Something that could make their $600 million merger look like pocket change. The timing was uncanny. Halverson was deep in talks with Krieger. a deal that could skyrocket our stock and make my core the centerpiece of a new EV line. But I hadn't shown it to my bosses yet. I was waiting, paranoid about corporate espionage and, honestly, savoring the moment I'd reveal it. It wasn't just a battery, it was my vindication. Every late night, every burned-out circuit, every time Vance called me the help, it all poured into this. Tomorrow's dinner would be hell, but I'd sit there, my secret humming in my chest, knowing I was steps away from changing the world. They'd see me soon enough. The Halverson Motors office buzzed with a nervous energy, like a pit crew before a race. We were days away from finalizing the $600 million merger with Krieger GmbH, a deal that could catapult us from scrappy underdog to global player. My team was neck-deep in stress testing our EV prototypes, ensuring every spec matched Krieger's demands. I'd been dodging calls from our CEO Harlan, who kept asking about any game-changers we might have up our sleeve. He didn't know about the kinetic core, still locked in my garage, its patent safe under my shell company. I wasn't ready to show it, not until I knew it was bulletproof. Dewey caught me triple-checking data at my desk and grinned. "Marla, you're gonna burn out before the Germans even sign." I smirked, but my stomach churned. The merger was my shot, but tonight I had to face the Bannisters. The annual family dinner was a ritual I couldn't skip, not without Vance spinning it as proof I was ungrateful. I drove to the estate in my beat-up hatchback, the same one I'd tested the core in, feeling like a gladiator entering the Colosseum. The Bannister mansion loomed, all glass and marble, a monument to Vance's ego. I parked next to Elton's Porsche and Twyla's Range Rover, my car looking like a stray dog among thoroughbreds. Inside, I'd faced the usual lineup: Vance, grizzled and commanding; Elton, smug in his tailored suit; Twyla, her smile sharp as a blade; Perry, her husband, who'd probably try to pitch me a shady investment; and Fern, Elton's fiancée, whose charm was a velvet glove over a fist. They'd circle me, probing for weaknesses, dismissing my life's work. I'd packed a mental shield, the kinetic core. Knowing it existed, that I'd built something they couldn't fathom, kept me steady. But doubt crept in. What if the merger fell through? What if Krieger sniffed out a flaw I'd missed? I shook it off, focusing on the dinner. Mom's absence would be a ghost at the table. She'd always soften their edges. Without her, it was open season. I expected Twyla to flaunt her latest cultural triumph, probably some overpriced art installation. Elton would brag about the merger, claiming credit for a deal he barely understood. Vance would watch, judging, while Perry and Fern lobbed subtle digs. I'd smile, nod, and let them think they'd won. Back at the office, Selma had texted me a meme of a cat in armor, captioned, "You got this, Marla." I laughed, but the weight didn't lift. The merger wasn't just about Halverson. It was about proving I was more than their caricature. The core could redefine EVs, save lives with cleaner tech, and, let's be honest, make me untouchable. But I had to survive tonight first. I checked my phone. No new crises from the lab. Good. I slipped into a plain black dress, nothing flashy, cut and grabbed my keys. The drive to the estate was quiet, the city fading into manicured suburbs. I rehearsed my lines, my deflections. Whatever they threw, I'd take it, because soon they'd see what I'd built. Soon, they'd choke on their words. The Bannister dining room was a battlefield disguised as opulence, all crystal chandeliers and polished silver. I stepped inside, the air thick with perfume and pretense, and felt every eye lock onto me. Vance sat at the head, his gray hair slicked back, looking like a king about to pass judgment. Elton lounged to his right, scrolling his phone, probably checking stock prices. Twyla, in a silk dress that screamed money, leaned into Perry, who was already halfway through a scotch. Fern, perched beside Elton, flashed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Marla, you made it," she said, her tone implying I was late, though I was 5 minutes early. I nodded, taking my seat at the table's far end, the spot they always reserved for me, like an afterthought. The onslaught started with the appetizers. Twyla passed me a plate of shrimp ceviche, her voice dripping honey. "So Marla still? Fixing cars?" The pause was deliberate, a jab dressed as curiosity. I swallowed a retort saying, "Designing engines actually. Big project at Halverson." Perry snorted, not even looking up. "Engines, huh? Like, for lawnmowers?" Laughter rippled. Vance didn't join in, but his silence was louder, his gaze fixed on his wineglass. I forced a smile, my fingers tightening around my fork. They knew Halverson was in talks with Krieger. Elton had been name-dropping the merger all month, but to them, my role was a punchline. Fern leaned forward, her diamond earrings catching the light. "It's so quaint, Marla, how you stick with that hands-on stuff. Quaint." The word was a slap, implying I was some hobbyist, not a senior engineer steering a $600 million deal. I started to explain, about leading my team, about the EV prototypes, but Elton cut in. "Speaking of Krieger," he said, voice smug, "I closed a side deal with their CFO last week, paved the way for Dad's vision." Vance nodded, finally engaged. "That's my boy," he said, and the table toasted Elton's brilliance. My half-sentence hung in the air, ignored. The main course arrived, and the jabs kept coming. Twyla mused about her latest gallery opening, a cultural milestone, while side-eyeing me. "Marla, you wouldn't get it. Art's not really your thing, is it?" I let it slide, but Perry piled on. "Yeah, grease stains don't exactly scream sophistication." He grinned, expecting laughs. Fern obliged, her giggle sharp. I took a sip of water, my pulse steadying. I pictured the kinetic core humming in my garage, its potential dwarfing their petty empire. It was my anchor, keeping me from snapping back. Vance finally spoke, his voice low, commanding. "Marla, how's that job of yours, still tinkering?" The word was a blade, and the table went quiet, waiting for me to falter. I met his eyes. "It's good, leading a team, pushing EV tech, big stuff." He raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Big stuff," he echoed, like I'd said I was baking cookies. Twyla smirked. "Oh, Marla, you're so dedicated." The subtext was clear, dedicated to being beneath them. I chewed my steak, tasting nothing as they pivoted to Elton's upcoming wedding plans with Fern. My world, my lab, my team, my core, didn't exist here. I was a prop in their play, tolerated until they could rewrite me out. The dessert plates were cleared, but the air in the Bannister dining room grew heavier, like a storm about to break. Vance leaned back, swirling his cognac, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the table. Twyla and Perry whispered, their glances darting my way, while Elton adjusted his cufflinks, a nervous tick I'd clocked years ago. Fern's smile was frozen, her fork tapping her plate. I sensed it coming, the moment they'd been building toward all night. My stomach knotted, but I kept my face neutral, sipping my coffee, the kinetic core's secret burning in my chest like a shield. Vance cleared his throat, silencing the room. "Marla," he began, his voice deliberate, "we've been discussing the family's future." The word family landed like a gavel, and I knew I wasn't included in his definition. He set his glass down, leaning forward. "Bannister Enterprises is at a crossroads. The Krieger merger, Elton's deals, Twyla's cultural ventures, they're carrying our name forward." He paused, letting the weight settle. "But you're not part of that vision." The words hit like a punch, though I'd half expected them. Twyla's lips curled into a satisfied smirk, and Perry nodded, like this was a boardroom vote. Elton avoided my gaze, while Fern's eyes gleamed with something like pity, sharp and false. Vance continued, his tone final. "We've decided it's best to formalize things. You're out, Marla. No inheritance, no stake in the company. You've chosen your path, tinkering as you call it. We're moving on without you." The room was silent, save for the faint clink of Fern's fork. My pulse thundered, but I didn't flinch. I'd been erased before by their laughter, their dismissals, but this was different. This was a public execution, dressed up as a family decision. Twyla spoke next, her voice soft but venomous. "It's not personal, Marla, you just don't fit. You never did." Perry chuckled, muttering, "Grease monkeys don't sit at the grown-up table." Elton finally looked at me, his expression a mix of guilt and relief, like he was glad it was done. I could have screamed, could have thrown my coffee in Vance's face, but I sat still, letting their words wash over me. I thought of Mom, how she'd fought to keep me in their orbit, and how they'd waited until she was gone to do this. I thought of the kinetic core, my proof that I was more than their caricature. But the hurt was real, a raw ache I hadn't expected. They weren't just cutting me off, they were rewriting my existence, pretending I'd never been part of their world. I opened my mouth to respond, to tell them they were fools, that their precious merger was built on tech I'd shaped, when Vance raised a hand. "No need for dramatics, Marla. It's done. You can leave after coffee." The finality in his voice was meant to crush me, to send me slinking out like a scolded child. Twyla leaned back, triumphant, while Fern whispered something to Elton, who nodded. Perry was already pouring another drink, as if I was already gone. I set my cup down, my hand steady, and looked at Vance. "You sure about this?" I asked, my voice calm, almost curious. He frowned, caught off guard, but before he could answer, my phone buzzed in my pocket, loud enough to make Fern jump. I didn't move. Not yet. My phone buzzed again, insistent, cutting through the suffocating silence of the Bannister dining room. Vance's frown deepened, his fingers tightening around his cognac glass, while Twyla's smirk faltered, her eyes flicking to my pocket. Elton shifted uncomfortably, and Perry muttered something about rudeness. Fern's perfect composure cracked, her lips pursing as if I'd personally offended her. I let the phone hum one more time, savoring their irritation, before pulling it out. The screen lit up, Harlan, Halverson's CEO. My heart kicked into overdrive, but I kept my face blank, sliding my thumb to answer. "Marla Kincaid," I said, loud enough for the table to hear. Harlan's voice was frantic, a rare break from his usual calm. "Marla, we've got a crisis. Krieger's lead engineer just flagged a flaw in their new EV platform. Catastrophic battery failure under high load. People could die." The words hit like a shockwave, and I felt the room tilt. I stood, stepping away from the table, my back to the banister stairs. "How bad?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Harlan didn't mince words. "Bad enough to tank the merger. Their team's panicking, says it's unfixable without a complete redesign. But I heard about your side project, Marla. The kinetic core. Is it real?" My breath caught. Someone had leaked it. Dewey? Selma? Didn't matter now. "It's real," I said, "and it could solve this." I turned back to the table, phone still at my ear, and caught Vance's gaze. His eyes narrowed, sensing something shifting. Twyla leaned forward, whispering to Perry, while Elton's phone was out now, his fingers hovering like he was itching to check something. Fern's smile was gone, replaced by a calculating stare. Harlan kept talking, urgent. "Krieger's flying in tomorrow. They want you, Marla. Not me, not the board. You. They know you're the one who can fix this." I nodded, though he couldn't see it. "I'll be there. Send me the specs." I hung up, my pulse racing, and faced the table. The banisters were frozen, their smugness unraveling. Vance spoke first, his voice clipped. "What was that about?" I didn't answer right away, letting the moment stretch. Then I said, "Krieger's merger, your golden ticket? It's crumbling. Their EV battery's a death trap and they need me to save it." Twyla laughed, sharp and nervous. "You? What do you know about batteries?" Perry scoffed, but it was weak, his eyes darting to Vance. Elton's phone buzzed now, and he glanced at it, his face paling. News traveled fast. I stepped closer, my voice low but clear. "I built something called the kinetic core. It's better than anything Krieger's got, and it's the only thing that can keep your $600 million dream from crashing. They don't want you, Elton, or you, Vance. They want the mechanic." The word landed like a slap, and I saw it hit. Twyla's mouth opened, then closed. Fern's fork clattered to her plate. Vance's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. For the first time I saw doubt in his eyes. My phone buzzed again, a text from Selma. "Krieger's team just name-dropped you on a call. You're a legend." I slipped the phone into my pocket, my resolve hardening. They'd disowned me minutes ago, but now their empire hung on the one they'd cast out. The Bannister dining room, once a fortress of their superiority, felt like a house of cards mid-collapse. Vance's face was a mask of barely contained fury, his knuckles white around his glass. Twyla's eyes darted between me and Elton, her smugness replaced by something like panic. Perry's scotch sat untouched, his usual bravado gone, while Fern's calculated charm had evaporated, her gaze sharp and desperate. Elton was furiously typing on his phone, no doubt scrambling to verify what I'd just dropped. The air crackled with their disbelief, and I stood there, the mechanic they'd disowned, holding the key to their empire's survival. I didn't rush. I let their silence fester, then spoke, my voice calm but razor-edged. "You've spent years calling me a nobody, Vance. You, Twyla. All of you, laughing at my work, my life, but your precious merger, it's dead without me." I turned to Elton, who froze, his phone still in hand. "You didn't close that deal, Elton. You rode on Halverson's tech, my tech, and now Krieger's begging for the one person you just cut off." His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Twyla tried to recover, her voice shrill. "You're bluffing, Marla. You're just exaggerating." I smiled cold. "Am I? Check your stock alerts. Krieger's already leaking the flaw. Markets don't lie." Perry finally found his voice, but it was weak. "Come on, Marla, let's not get dramatic. We're family." The word was a joke, and I laughed, sharp enough to make Fern flinch. Stepfamily? You disowned me 10 minutes ago. You don't get to rewrite that now. I stepped closer to Vance, meeting his glare. You built an empire on control, but you missed the biggest threat, underestimating me. I built the kinetic core in my garage, something your boardrooms couldn't dream of. And I don't need your name to prove it. Vance leaned forward, his voice low, dangerous. You think you can walk away and take us down with you? I didn't blink. I'm not taking you down, I'm saving Krieger's platform, because I can, but don't expect me to save your pride. Twyla gasped, theatrical, and whispered to Perry, who muttered something about ungrateful. Fern tried to pivot, her tone syrupy. Marla, let's talk this out, we didn't mean, I cut her off. You meant every word. And I'm done pretending it's okay. I grabbed my coat from the chair, my movements deliberate. Elton finally spoke, his voice tight. Marla, if this is true, we can renegotiate. The desperation in his eyes was almost pathetic. I shook my head. Too late, you made your choice. I'm not here to beg for your scraps. I turned to the door, pausing to look back at Vance. You'll see my name soon enough, not as a Bannister, but as the one who fixed your mess. Their faces, shock, rage, fear, were a snapshot I'd carry forever. I walked out, the heavy oak door closing behind me with a thud that felt final. My hatchback waited in the drive, a humble chariot next to their luxury cars. I slid in, started the engine, and drove into the night, my phone buzzing with messages from Dewey and Selma, ready to rally. The Bannisters thought they'd broken me, but I was just getting started. The city lights blurred as I drove away from the Bannister estate, my heart still pounding from the showdown. The weight of their words, disowned, erased, lingered, but so did the fire of walking out on my terms. I didn't head home. Instead, I steered toward Halverson's R&D lab, where my real family waited. The lab was a squat, unassuming building, but inside it was alive with the hum of machines and the kind of loyalty the Bannisters could never buy. Dewey and Selma had texted me to meet them there. No questions asked, just a simple, "We're here." That was enough. I pulled into the lot, my hatchback dwarfed by the prototype EVs parked outside. Inside, the lab was dim, lit by the glow of monitors and the faint buzz of a welder in the corner. Dewey was sprawled on a stool, his wiry frame hunched over a sensor array, while Selma tapped away at her laptop, her braids swinging as she nodded to music only she could hear. They looked up as I walked in, and Dewey grinned, tossing me a soda. "Well, damn, Marla, you look like you just fought a dragon." Selma smirked, pulling out an earbud. "And won, by the look of it. Spill." I dropped into a chair, the tension in my shoulders easing for the first time all night. I told them everything. The dinner, Vance's cold decree, the call from Harlan, and how I'd left the Bannisters scrambling. Dewey let out a low whistle when I mentioned the kinetic core. "You've been sitting on a game changer and didn't tell us?" "Respect." Selma leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "So Krieger's begging for you now? That's poetic. Your stepfamily's gotta be choking on their caviar." I laughed, the sound raw but real, and it felt like a release. We cracked open the sodas, the clink of cans a small toast to surviving. Dewey shared a story about his own dad, a trucker who never got why he'd waste his brain on tech. Selma talked about her cousin, who tried to shame her for coding instead of settling down. It wasn't the Bannisters' polished cruelty, but it was the same vibe, people trying to shrink you to fit their world. Here, though, I wasn't invisible. Dewey handed me a wrench, joking we should build something to celebrate, and Selma queued up a playlist of old-school hip-hop, the bass rattling the lab's cheap speaker. We didn't work, we just talked, laughed, and let the night unfold. The contrast hit me hard. The Bannisters' dinner was a performance, every word a transaction, every glance a power play. Here in this cluttered lab with my misfit crew, I was seen, not as a threat or a prop, but as Marla, the one who could make an engine sing. Dewey sketched a dumb cartoon of me as a superhero, core woman, and taped it to my monitor. Selma promised to hack the Bannisters' Wi-Fi just for fun. It was messy, real, and warm in a way their marble mansion never could be. I didn't need their name or their money. I had this, people who'd have my back whether I saved the merger or not. And tomorrow, when I faced Krieger's team, I'd carry that with me, not the Bannisters' poison. The lab's fluorescent lights felt like home, but dawn was creeping in, and I had to face the world beyond its walls. Krieger's team was landing in hours, and Harlan had texted me a dozen times, each message more urgent. "Marla, We need you at HQ by 8 a.m. Bring everything. The kinetic core was still in my garage, a secret I'd guarded like a treasure, but now it was time to play my hand. I left Dewey and Selma with a promise to update them, drove home, and loaded the core's prototype into my hatchback. My phone was silent, no calls or texts from the Bannisters. Good. Their silence was louder than their insults, proof they were reeling. At Halverson's headquarters, the conference room was a war zone of laptops, coffee cups, and bleary-eyed execs. Krieger's engineers, led by a gruff guy named Rolf, were already there, their faces grim as they pored over data. Harlan pulled me aside, his voice low. "Marla, they're saying the battery flaw could kill the merger, and their entire EV line. Tell me you've got something." I nodded, setting the kinetic core's case on the table. "I do, let's show them." Rolf raised an eyebrow but didn't object. I unpacked the core, its sleek design drawing curious glances, and launched into my pitch. 600-mile range, 20-minute charge, scalable for mass production. The room went quiet, then erupted in questions. By noon, Rolf was on the phone with Krieger's CEO, and Harlan was grinning like a kid at Christmas. The Bannisters predictably tried to claw their way back. Elton texted first, a stiff, "We should talk about your role in the family." Twyla followed, her message dripping with fake concern. "Marla, let's not burn bridges." Vance's assistant even called, requesting a private meeting. I ignored them all. Their empire was tied to the merger, and they knew I held the key. But I wasn't playing their game anymore. I met with Halverson's legal team, ensuring the core's patent stayed in my name, not theirs. When Vance finally called himself, I let it go to voicemail. His message was curt. "Marla, we can make this right. Call me." I deleted it. I set new rules, clear and non-negotiable. No more family dinners, no more playing their scapegoat. If they wanted to talk, it'd be on my terms, through lawyers or not at all. Dewey and Selma became my sounding board, helping me navigate the fallout. Selma suggested I block their numbers, but I didn't. Not yet. Let them squirm, let them see my name in the headlines as Krieger praised Halverson's breakthrough. Dewey, ever practical, helped me draft a statement for the press, keeping it vague but firm. "I'm proud to lead innovation at Halverson. My focus is the future, not the past." It was a line in the sand, and it felt good. The aftermath wasn't just about cutting ties, it was about building something new. I moved the core's prototype to a secure lab, hired a small team to refine it, and started talks with Harlan about spinning it into a new division, one I'd run. The Bannisters could keep their marble mansion and their mergers. I was carving my own path, one where loyalty wasn't bought and respect wasn't begged for. As I left the office that night, the city skyline glittering, I felt lighter. The weight of their judgment was gone, replaced by a quiet strength. I wasn't their outcast anymore. I was Marla Kincaid, and I was enough. The weeks after the Krieger meeting were a whirlwind, but I was in the driver's seat. The kinetic core wasn't just a prototype anymore. It was the cornerstone of Halverson's new EV division, and I was tapped to lead it. Harlan didn't hesitate, handing me a corner office and a budget that made my head spin. The press caught wind, and soon my name was everywhere. Marla Kincaid, the engineer who saved Krieger's $600 million merger. I didn't write the headlines, but I didn't mind them either. Each one was a brick in the legacy I was building, one that had nothing to do with the Bannisters' empire. I poured my energy into impact. The core's tech wasn't just about range or speed. It could make EVs affordable, cutting emissions in communities that needed it most. I partnered with a nonprofit to pilot a program, retrofitting delivery vans for small businesses in low-income areas. The first van rolled out in a neighborhood near my old apartment, and when the owner, a guy named Lester, shook my hand, his grin was worth more than any Bannister toast. Dewey and Selma were all in, too. Dewey tweaked the core's sensors for urban routes, while Selma built an app to track performance. We were a team, not just fixing cars, but changing lives. The Bannisters couldn't ignore me now. Their merger had gone through, thanks to me, but the spotlight was mine. I heard through the grapevine, Selma's cousin, who knew Fern's stylist, that Twyla was livid, calling me opportunistic. Elton tried spinning it, claiming he'd mentored me, which got a laugh at the lab. Vance stayed quiet, but his silence felt different, like he was recalculating. I didn't care. Their name, once a cage, was just noise now. I was redefining it on my terms. Not as a Bannister, but as Marla Kincaid, the woman who turned just the mechanic into a force. I started speaking at industry events, not to boast but to pull others up. At a Detroit Auto Summit, I shared the stage with engineers I'd idolized, telling my story. Garage nights, burned-out circuits, and all. The crowd, packed with young women and underdogs like me, hung on every word. Afterward, a kid named Josie, barely 20, told me she'd chosen engineering because of my patents. That hit harder than any headline. I gave her my card, told her to call me. My legacy wasn't just tech, it was opening doors I'd had to kick down. Back at Halverson, I hung a photo in my office, not of the core but of Mom smiling in her garden. She'd believed in me when the Bannisters didn't, and I was honoring her now, not them. The lab crew threw a party when the core hit production, with Dewey's terrible DJ skills and Selma's homemade tacos. We danced under string lights, the city humming outside, and I felt it. A pride that wasn't about proving them wrong, but about building something right. The Bannisters could keep their empire. I'd claimed my own, and it was bigger than they'd ever understand. The hum of the Halverson lab had become my heartbeat, but tonight, I was home, alone in my apartment, the city's glow filtering through my window. The kinetic core was in production, my team was thriving, and the Bannisters were a fading echo. I sat on my couch, a glass of cheap wine in hand, staring at a photo of Mom and me from years ago, her laugh lines deep, my teenage scowl half hidden under a baseball cap. I'd spent so long fighting to prove I wasn't their outcast, but now, with the world shouting my name, I realized the fight wasn't about them. It was about me, and I'd won. I thought back to the garage nights, the doubt, the sting of Vance's voice calling me the help. Those moments had forged me, but they didn't define me. The kinetic core, the lives it would touch, the doors it was opening, that was my truth. I didn't need the Bannisters' approval or their empire. I'd built my own, not out of spite, but out of love for the work, for the people like Dewey and Selma who saw me, for the kid at the summit who'd clutched my card like a lifeline. My worth wasn't in their dining room or their bank accounts, it was in the calluses on my hands, the equations in my head, the quiet certainty that I was enough. I walked to my desk where a stack of letters sat, notes from engineers, students, even a mechanic in Ohio who'd read about the core and wrote, "You're why I keep going." I didn't cry, but I felt the weight lift like I'd finally exhaled. The Bannisters could keep their games. I was free, not because I'd beaten them, but because I'd stopped playing. I looked out at the city, its pulse steady, and felt peace, a deep, unshakable kind that no merger or headline could give. This was my legacy, my life, and I was ready for whatever came next. Hey, have you ever felt like someone tried to box you into a version of yourself that just didn't fit? That's where I was, caught in the Bannisters' shadow, until I realized my story wasn't theirs to write. I'm Marla Kincaid, and sharing this journey, every late night, every fight, every win, has been my way of saying, you can redefine your own path too. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Times you proved the doubters wrong, or found your own way to shine. If my journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to define success on their own terms. Keep building, keep fighting, and know that your worth is yours to claim, no matter who tries to take it away.